All right. Part two. Luckily, my family's gone to bed, so I don't have to worry about getting back to the family, I guess. So Chuck will join us again in a minute here. We'll continue on for another 20, 30 minutes. I'll tell you, I was actually looking forward to maybe bringing Chuck back in a couple of weeks because then it's less stress on me trying to worry about booking another guest. So it makes it easy on me that I don't have to go out and try and find somebody else. But I'll continue to try and get guests on every week, folks. Midweek with Eric Smith. We're going to keep doing it on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And one of my guests in the next couple of weeks is going to be Brendan Dunlop, who's still here watching, and he's the one that really pushed for this. So, BD, I'm going to be bugging you shortly to come on the show because I'm at the point, too, where I want to start talking to a lot of people within the Sportsnet family, too, about their starts in the industry, and everybody's got a story to tell. You, no matter who you are right now, whatever job you do, you've got a story. Everybody's got a story. And I will say this as well. A couple of people that are writing in now, and I'll just kind of say this while I'm waiting for Chuck to rejoin the mix. Who was it back here? Somebody said get Nav. I've already kind of got the wheels rolling with that, so I'm hoping to have Nav Bhatia joining me at some point again in the coming weeks. And somebody else mentioned Mo Pete, and I'll be totally honest with you folks. And again, if Brendan's watching this right now, I know he can attest to this. I've avoided right now getting players and coaches on for one major reason. I would love to talk to them. I would love to have them on, and I'm sure they would come on, some of them. But I think I don't want to step on any toes within the Sportsnet family because, listen, we still got guys that are doing a fabulous job doing damn near 24/7 sports talk radio. And whether it be the boys in the morning, whether it be mid-morning, whether it be afternoons with Blair and Tim and Sid and everybody else, all the guys I think are doing a hell of a job, let alone the dudes on the evenings and weekends. I don't want to be taking guests away from them by grabbing athletes and coaches and whatnot, because I think these shows are doing a crazy good job of telling stories right now. And I've said a few times, I think, for those of you who watch this show, I've said this a few times, I love what I'm hearing right now on the radio station because I appreciate hearing stories about guys' careers and their lives as opposed to just the X's and O's of last night's game, tomorrow night's game, what happened last game, what needs to happen next game, etc. I've enjoyed the storytelling more than anything else. So I'm trying to avoid getting those types of guests on this show because I don't want to take away from my colleagues and what they're doing on their daily 2, 3, 4-hour radio talk shows, let alone the fact that I think the folks within the Sportsnet family on the TV/digital side are doing the same thing, getting a lot of good interviews that have been posted on the website and everything else. So I'm trying to avoid that, but obviously players, coaches, they're welcome here anytime as long as I'm not, again, stepping on my colleagues' feet. All right, I'm a little late in bringing Swirsky into the mix here. I just wanted to get that off my chest here while I was waiting for Chuck. So I'm going to invite Chuck back in and get rolling again here. All right, here we go. Chuck, thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. So,
all right.
We were at Fran's.
We're at Fran's and Jack's looking for beer. Shocking that Jack's looking for beer.
No, I'll tell you what's shocking. One of our first road trips, we're in Sean Marks, who's now, my guy. I love him with the Nets. And so he's a rookie the same year with Vince. And so we're in San Antonio. And you know me, Eric. I mean, I'm really not a runner. I mean, the game's over. I go back to my hotel room. I'm already working on the next game. There was no league pass, so I'm looking at notes. I'm doing, it was just a crazy year. So he goes, Chuck, this is the Riverwalk. Chuck, come on, we're gonna hit the Riverwalk. And I'm thinking, Jack, it's like 11:30. I should be in bed, because that's the way I am. I'm not. I'm a ham and cheese kind of guy give me a Pepsi. Okay?
Salami and cheese kind of guy.
Salami.
Chuck, come on.
I'm going to get the salami and cheese. Right. Back then I was ham and cheese, then salami. Get out the salami and cheese, mama. Eric Smith is not over yet. So anyway, Eric, we're on the Riverwalk and we go into a bar. And so, here I'm ordering maybe a beer or whatever. And so there's a guy at the piano. And it's almost now, I'm drinking a beer, and it takes me like an hour to finish a beer. And
this is Dirty Nelly's in San Antonio.
Yes.
And I think it's Dirty with a U, Dirty Nelly's with the piano bar. The peanuts all over the floor.
Yes. And Jack is enjoying himself, which is okay. I love Jack. So now, and a couple of players are there, including Sean Marks. And Sean is buying us drinks and whatnot, buying Jack drinks and whatnot. So now there's the guy at the piano, and he's playing and playing and playing. Oh, Danny boy. And all of a sudden, Jack, out of nowhere, taps him on the shoulder and basically says, "You're done for the night." And I'm looking at what? Done for the night? You just took the piano player and sent him to, like, Lubbock, Texas. So Jack's on. He didn't even know how to play the piano. Oh, Daddy, boy, the fields are green. And I'm thinking, oh my God. So anyway, but Jack and I'll tell you what, I loved working with Jack. Jack and Leo, I had a magnificent time working with both of them. And with Bill, if somebody told me in 22 years, I would have no issues with. I mean, because some guys, it's not good. But with me, I love Leo, love Jack, love Bill Wennington.
And you came in with Jack at a time that was one hell of a time to come in to the Toronto Raptors franchise as well. Forget the first 3 years. All of a sudden, boom, year 4, you're starting, lockout shortened year. And, oh, yeah, by the way, there's this kid named Vince Carter that is ready to burst onto the scene, not only locally or nationally, but globally.
And Tracy McGrady. Because I'm telling you what, right now, T-Mac was in his second year with or without Vince. Tracy McGrady would have been a superstar no matter who he was playing with. I love T-Mac. And, I had no problems whatsoever with T-Mac to the rack. I love Tracy to this day. If Tracy came, calling, I'd be there for him in a heartbeat. I loved him. I'm sorry things dissolved the way they did. I wish he would have stayed with Vince because I think the Raptors would have gone to finals. But that's, who knows whether or not that would happen or not. But I would love to have seen both play. Vince came on the scene, and Eric, with every night we played 50 games in like 98 days or whatever it was, and everything. He was just, it was just nasty. I mean, just the first game at Boston, then we go to Washington. I can recite that first 2 weeks because it's just emblazoned in my brain about that lockout year. I have the flu. I feel awful. I'm trying to move my family from the States. I got a lot of things going on. It's a brand new element to my play-by-play because I had done college, the NBA games faster, but I'll tell you what, Jack got me through it. Without Jack, it doesn't happen.
So, Chuck, let's kind of stay on that a little bit then. How difficult was it, and why was it difficult, putting aside the personal stuff off the floor, beyond the floor, when you just spoke about the speed of the game, what made it so different calling college ball versus NBA, and how difficult was that for you then to kind of find that transition, to find your legs at the professional level?
Well, remember, in the college game didn't have a shot clock. Mm-hmm. So for teams that didn't have talent, Eric, like when Michigan would play at that time, let's say Northwestern didn't have the skill set. So they would hold the ball. So, like you'd get in the games 44-40, 50-46. It was like watching Kevin O'Neal with the Raptors. Hey, we scored 65 points against Minnesota. But no, oh boy. So anyway, but the game was really, really fast. And I'll tell you, that first preseason game Jack and I did at Skydome, that was Vince's really first game against Paul Pierce's first game. That, because that year, Raptors and Celtics played 2 preseason games, and then the Raptors opened up in Boston. Yep, which was unbelievable. But I mean, just the pace and it was so fast. And that's why you talk to a player and they say, "What's the biggest transition from college to pro?" What's the first thing they say? How fast the game is. I mean, that ball's over the midcourt line in 2 seconds. It's like, wow. So, but, we worked it out and it was fine.
I still find it a challenge to this day, to your point about the speed, trying to work Jonesian as an analyst, more
Very
than
hard.
It can be extremely difficult because to try and find that balance and that's just kind of looking behind the curtain a little bit. I don't know if you still have the same issue at times, even with Bill Wennington, but by the time the ball goes in, to your point, generally speaking, the rule of thumb was always ball goes in the hoop, analyst has it until the ball is inbounded, and then it
That's
crosses center
correct.
court, then give it back to the play-by-play guy. And we're talking radio here. TV, different rules because obviously you as a viewer can see everything. You don't necessarily need to worry about whether it's the play-by-play guy or the color guy, et cetera. But in radio, if the play-by-play guy's not doing his job, you're lost. You're in your car, you're at home, you're listening wherever you're listening to the radio. You have no idea what's going on if the play-by-play guy's not giving you the play-by-play. But it can be difficult then to work your analyst in at all of the right occasions because of the speed of the game at this point. And that's why what I've kind of appreciated with what I think Jonesy and I do, Chuck, and I believe you and Jack certainly did a ton of it too. Maybe that's where I sort of learned my craft by listening to you guys for so long, is while we do have a traditional broadcast, we also, to me, have a conversational broadcast where if it just so happens that Jonesy's still talking and he says, and he does a little play-by-play for a couple of seconds or more in order to set up the play properly, I don't care. Go ahead. This isn't to me about ego of I need to speak, shut up, give me my time. No, it's got to be a flow, and to me that's almost more of a baseball style in a sense. You don't have the time to tell the stories because it's a much, much, much faster game, but it's more conversational instead of this is my job, this is your job, I have a role, you have a role, and nobody crosses over. I like to cross over and kind of, share the broadcast more than anything else.
Yeah, well, again, it depends on who you work with, and you have to have really an egoless booth or table in this case, because certain people don't want to give that up. Some people do. Now, in the case, I always felt that, like on TV, as long as I'm able to be myself, I have no problems with Jack, Leo, whomever on the television side. And Jack and I hit it off so well in radio. I'll say this, the year we did simulcast was really hard, especially hard on Leo, because he was used to TV. And then all of a sudden, which was understandable because, and I'm not saying this from an ego standpoint, but, Nelson wanted me on radio and television wanted me as well, and which was very nice. And I appreciate that. But as it turns out, simulcast is very, very difficult. And I felt badly for Leo because he's trying to, make that transition from TV and letting the radio audience know. And
Yeah.
fortunately, we only did it for 1 year. And then obviously I moved over to TV until I left. But, Eric, it was those first years with the Raptors, I wouldn't trade anything because I love Butch Carter as a coach. Things really unraveled with what happened and transpired. I remember, and maybe you have it in front of you, the 1999-2000 season. We finish the season, I believe, in Florida. We either played Miami or Orlando, whatever. And we stay at this resort to get ready for our first ever playoff series in franchise history against New York. I go on the bus, and Butch is in the back of the bus, and he says, I'm going to sue that guy. And we're the only two on the bus. And I said, what? He says, Marcus Camby. I'm going to sue him. I said, you're going to sue Marcus Camby? And because Marcus Camby and Butch were going at it. Remember this?
Oh, yeah.
And so we fly from Florida to open up the playoff series, and Butch had just written a book, and it was, pretty volatile regarding some of the statements he alleged regarding Bob Knight. And so he had the book going on, and he had the Marcus Camby thing going on. And by the way, we're playing a playoff series. And truth of the matter is, and then of course, Butch went, with the job situation, tried to see if he could rearrange some components of responsibilities and was released. Let me tell you this, Butch Carter can flat out coach. He can flat out coach. He was a superb NBA coach. And so early in that whole genre of Raptors ball, we had a lot of things going on. We had Vince taking his game from here to here. And then we had McGrady leaving, after the 99-2000 season, because in those days, rookies had 3-year contracts.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, Glenn went to work, started bringing in some veteran players. And that 2001 season, that club was on cruise control and it took off. And even though Lenny Wilkins was the coach, he took he was the perfect guy at that point because it was a veteran team and they knew how to play ball. I love that team.
Before I move on, I want to go back just for 1 second. Selfishly, 1,000% selfishly, Chuck, I'm glad that the simulcast didn't work out, because if it did work, I might not be doing what I'm doing right now.
Probably not. Yep.
Because of the fact that the simulcast only lasted 1 year. Suddenly another radio team was needed, and a year after that, I end up having a chance to step into the broadcast booth after 7-8 years on the pre-half and post. So
yep.
Selfishly, sorry, I'm glad that you went full-time TV. Right. But all right, I'm trying to look at the Vince years, especially as you've now brought up the playoffs. Making the playoffs against the Knicks the first year. I don't know about you, Chuck, but what stands out to me that first year, not just being there, but then to actually look like you got a chance of winning. And ultimately they bow out, LJ with the bank shot and he flashes up the symbol.
Top of the circle, a 3-ball.
To come back the next year against the same Knicks team and beat them in their joint, that's to me where it's like, okay, something might be special starting to brew here. Something's really good happening with this club.
Now, having said that, Eric, remember Camby was going through some personal issues, and so he was not a factor for the Knicks. And without any question, they missed him. But having said that, the Raptors won Game 5 on a Friday night at the Garden to advance to play Philadelphia. And by the way, they won that first game in Philly on a Sunday, and it was an unbelievable series. I think Lenny played the starters too much. And in that series, I think it cost him because that series should have been over in 6 and not 7. That's just my opinion. But it was an unbelievable series because the Vince graduation thing, again, with the North Carolina graduation, some people were in his corner, some people weren't. I took a neutral position because really it's none of my business. But, I mean, that club, I think, had they gotten past, I'm not sure they could have beaten Milwaukee, but with that momentum, who knows? But I think that club was ready. And then, of course, the following year, Vince got hurt, and Antonio Davis put the ball club on his shoulders. He carried that team in the last month of the season, and then they lost to Detroit in the playoffs. And then the following year was a complete disaster, and that's how the Bulls, or rather the Raptors, got Chris Bosh in the lottery. So, I mean, and then, Vince started having injuries, and then he, we could talk for an hour about Vince. I'm happy for him. If someone told me he'd play 22 years, I don't think anyone could ever have imagined that, because early in his career with the injuries, I was concerned he was going to get 10 in, and then all of it, and he started bouncing around from team to team to team. Yeah. But to his credit, you know what? He got his body together, nutrition, everything, and here we are.
Well, and he turned into a hell of a three-point shooter as his career went on as well, and kind of found a way to morph himself and to stay relevant. And it
was hard, Eric, doing that game, his first game back with the Nets, because normally I like to say things aren't personal. It was personal because I felt badly for the organization. I felt badly for the Tannenbaums. I felt badly for a lot of people in the organization that were hurt because it appeared that Vince wanted out. He was trying to play himself out of Toronto, or that conversation he had with John Thompson on TNT and all these things. And, my relationship with Vince went in the tank for a number of years. And then I actually wrote him a handwritten letter and I put it in his locker. And then we kind of had a conversation, patched things up. I saw him with Atlanta. My relationship with him is professional, but it will never be the same as it was when he first came in the league.
Chuck, I was saying this the other night, and your view of it, your take on it might be different than mine. I still think to this day, if there's not gray area, there's still some misinformation, or there are too many stories that have not been clarified or verified officially by the parties involved to this day, because you hear one story about whether there was a skirmish with Sam Mitchell. You hear another story where there wasn't one. You hear another story of,
Yep.
Jalen Rose telling versions. You hear another story of Vince saying that he didn't want to make the trade ultimately, and he said, I'll even stay and come off the bench. Yeah, Sam Mitchell's even talked about going to Rob Babcock and saying, don't trade Vince. Vince will stay. We're going to make a way to work this out. And Rob, who has since passed, and I told this story on another show a couple of nights ago, Rob Babcock, partly to his credit, I will say, as a man, in spite of the fact that it wasn't done in ink on a piece of paper, he said, no, I'm a man of my word. I believe in a man of his word and a handshake agreement. I'm not backing out of the trade. Now, and as I said this very thing, Chuck, on another show as well, with no disrespect to the man, he has since passed, and it's terrible what happened with Rob and his health, and I feel for the Babcock family. That was one of the worst trades in the history of the NBA. What he got back for Vince Carter, and I don't care what people say about how, a general manager is hamstrung when a player comes out and maybe publicly demands a trade, or at least it shows that he's upset and he doesn't want to be. You have to get back more for Vince Carter than what you did, and that set the franchise back for a long time, what the Raptors ultimately had left in their hands with Vince Carter off to New Jersey.
Yeah, well, I've talked to Rob. Rob was a great man with ethics and morals.
Agreed. Agreed.
Months before he passed away, I actually saw him in Phoenix, and we talked a little ball, but we really talked about life and his family. He loved his boys very, very, very much, and his wife Laura. During that whole period with Vince, things were starting to unravel by the minute. And when I say that, I mean by the minute. And Rob and I had dinner in Los Angeles, and he got a cell phone call from John Nash, who was running Portland. And Rob excused himself at the table and said, I'll be right back. Well, right back meant like 30 minutes. So he came back and shared some information with me that Portland wanted to make a deal, but there are a couple things that were probably not going to fly. And so he said, I'm telling you the truth. It's hard making a deal. And I said, well, then don't make a deal. And he goes, I've got to make a deal. And that's probably the only conversation I ever had with Rob regarding Vince. I'm doing the talk show, and it is I want to say it's a Friday. We're in Indiana. It's the Pacers and the Raptors, and all of a sudden a deal goes through. Now, honestly, the Knicks were salivating at getting Vince. I thought he was going to New York. Honestly, if someone said a trade's going to be made, where do you think he's going? I would have said the Knicks. They were scouting the Raptors every game, like every game. And so all of a sudden the Nets, and I'm looking at Aaron Williams, who lives in Chicago, by the way, wonderful man, Eric Williams, and then Alonzo Mourning. And I'm thinking, wow, and 2 first-round picks. Well, Alonzo doesn't show up, and they cut a check for $10 million. And then he signs with Miami and wins the title. I'm thinking, what's up with that? But again, you know what? That's in the past. And, that first game back was about as hostile of a crowd that I've ever seen, ever. And it was really hard doing a game. And I say that because you can never put yourself in the role as a fan, and I hope I didn't do that, but also as a voice of a team. I felt the fan base and how hurt they were. And so I'm glad things have come full circle, because in my opinion, Vince one day will have his jersey retired. He'll be a Hall of Fame player. There's no question about it. He should be in the Hall of Fame, and he should have his jersey retired, because in my opinion, he put basketball on the map in Canada, just not Toronto. You talk to kids now, it's the Carter effect. And I'm happy that his role, even though he was in Toronto for 4 years? Is that right, Eric? Four
no,
and
longer
half,
than that.
whatever.
Longer
Four
than
and a
that.
half? Really?
No, longer than that. It's almost
Well,
7
he came
full
in
seasons, 'cause-
98, and he left in 2000, 4, 5?
No, yeah, it was 405 because remember, Chuck, he signed his second contract, so he was here for
So
just
2000,
shy
so
of
let's
7 years.
say, let's say 5.5 years or whatever.
Anyway,
So anyway, bottom line is that, you know what, without Vince Carter, I mean, the league could not afford to have, I mean, Vancouver was on their way. Without Vince Carter, I don't know if basketball is still happening in Toronto.
no, I don't agree. I mean, I don't disagree. Excuse me. I completely agree with that, Chuck. I mean, his impact, no doubt. Javon Shepard was watching earlier. I don't know if he still is, but great Canadian baller, and
Yeah,
we were talking about the impact that Vince had on him, no doubt
go
in
blue,
his career.
Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
I mean, but
all
there
right,
were two. You know what, Eric? I mean, I know we got off on a tangent, but there
that's all
were
right.
so many positive things that I learned about myself and about Canada and about basketball and about enthusiasm and all this stuff because it was real. I mean, I remember Chris Zelkovich, the TV radio critic for the Toronto Star. He calls me up and he goes, "I want to do a feature on you." And I said, okay. He goes, "Let me ask you a question. Like, is this like really you or is this something?" I said, "No, this is me. I love basketball. I love people. I love the sport. I love the organization. And so this is not phony. I don't have, any agenda. It's just me. And so I'm not like a cookie cutter guy. And, um, and so it happened organically. And as it turned out, it was an unbelievable run.
Chuck, what led you to going for your Canadian citizenship? Why was that important to you?
Well, at the time I said, this is going to be it. This is me, and this is where I want to be. And Eric, in 2000, I went through the process, and so in 2000, let's see, the summer of 2006, I got a call from the Sonics, and they said, "Listen, I know you're from Seattle. Would you be willing to listen?" And I said, "Well, I'm under contract with the Raptors, and I really like it here in Toronto." And they said, "Well, if we get to a point where we're going to make a move, we're going to contact." And I said, "Okay, but you have to go through Tom Anselmi first, not me, Tom Anselmi." So I didn't hear anything from them, which is fine. Love the Raptors. Wheels are in motion. I'm a Canadian citizen. I love Canada, love Toronto, loved everything about what I was doing, loved living in Burlington. Um, so now 2007 and 2007, and we played the Nets in the playoffs.
Hmm.
And so we lose game six. Calderon underthrew a pass to
To
Bosch.
Bosch, yeah.
Had it
I
been
just talked to
thrown,
Jose 2 days ago. Just
and I
talked to
love
him.
Jose.
We were
Jose
talking
was my
about
guy.
that play.
I don't get close to a lot of players. Jose and I, as you know, Eric, we had a ritual on the road that we would, before the bus left, he and I would take a walk to the nearest Starbucks, and he would order his caramel macchiato, and I would order my tea, and we would talk about life. We'd talk about his farm. We talk about, Anna, his wife, all these things. And so I loved Jose. Under threw the pass, and he threw it over the top. Bosch would have dunked it. We go into game seven at the ACC back then, and there's no way the Raptors lose a seventh game. I'm sorry. No chance they're losing to the Nets, and they knew that. It was like when the Nets came out in game one wearing the red uniforms, and the slogan for the Raptors was "See Red," and the Nets are coming out in red uniforms. Richard Jefferson says, "Great, I'm glad 20,000 people showed up to see the Nets." Remember that?
Oh, I
Um,
remember. I
so
remember.
anyway, so the Sonics now in 2007, we lose game six. And a week later, the Sonics called Tom Anselmi, and Tom says, "Hey, Sonics called, and they want to talk to you." And I'm thinking, wow, my hometown team, the Sonics, Seattle. And so I'm on the phone with Seattle, and they said, "Listen, um, you're the only guy we want. We're going to fly you out here. We need to have you meet with a couple people, but if we offer this job, will you take it? And I said, well, like, here's the thing. I've got a very young family and all these rumors about Oklahoma City. What's going on? And I said, can you guarantee me you're going to be in Seattle next year? And he goes, no. So I told him I'm not going. I can't move from three schools, Toronto, Seattle, Oklahoma City. It wouldn't be fair. I'm not
Yeah.
even sure I would have taken the job. It would have been very tough, though, to turn Seattle down. It's my team. It's my
Yeah.
hometown team. So we go through, and now Orlando. We play Orlando in the playoffs. And in fact, Matt Devlin was doing the games, I think, on NBA TV or Turner, whatever it was.
Yep.
So
Yep.
he was doing the games then. Leo and I are doing the TV. Jack was doing games as well. And so we lose to the Magic. And so 3 days after the playoff series, the Bulls, and Tom Anselmi calls me. I'm playing in the on my driveway with TC and Mark, my two boys. And Tom Anselmi says, well, last year it's the Sonics. Now this year it's the Bulls. I said, Bulls? What Bulls? It just didn't register. I'm playing in the front driveway with the kids. I'm not thinking Chicago Bulls. And he goes, the Chicago Bulls want to talk to you. I got a call today. And, this is the last time we're going through this. You either go or you're here. You're under contract. And I totally got it. And I love Tom Anselmi. I just heard from him the other day because of Mark Eversley and whatnot. And so I maintained great relationship with Tom. I love Tom Anselmi. Awesome, awesome person. And so I could understand his frustration. But it's not like I'm seeking these teams. I mean, they're coming to me.
Sure.
So I talked to the Bulls. I'm going through some issues in my marital life, thinking, okay, maybe if we move back to Chicago, where we know people, it'll help. It's a stable situation. Some other things that, were personal were in effect as well. And so I made that move. It was very, 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 very difficult. Making that decision and walking into Tom Anselmi's office was probably, from a professional standpoint, the hardest thing I ever had to do, because the way the Raptors treated me and respected me, first as a person and secondly as a broadcaster. But I made the move. Bulls are fine. They're great, unbelievable people, just like the Raptors. Outstanding ownership, outstanding management, great people. I work with Bill Wennington. So there you go.
And did it make it tougher even for you, Chuck, as difficult as the decision was, given how you had latched onto the community and the organization,
Absolutely.
not just in a peripheral way,
Yep.
but as I was saying, I mean, and
Yep.
folks know this, but you became a citizen.
Yep.
and all of a sudden now you're gone back to the
I
U.S.
get it. Yep.
Yeah.
Very hard, extremely hard. And there were a lot of sleepless nights. And I'm not going to lie to you, a lot of sleepless nights. And I became extremely vulnerable with my feelings about a lot of things. Some of the things I liked about myself, a lot of things I didn't like about myself. And it was very, very hard. It was extremely hard going back to Toronto for the first time with the Bulls, because of the relationships with you and with Jack and with Leo and whatnot that I had. Seeing a lot of people, from security staff to people that worked at MLSE that were awesome, and the Tannenbaums remain awesome people to this day with me. But as the years went by, then you start kind of weaning off that, although it's still, you walk in and you see things. A lot of people have left from the MLSE that I worked at, but one of the more frequently asked questions I got during the championship run happened, are you jealous? And I said, absolutely not. I'm happy. I'm happy for people like you and Paul and Matt and Leo and Jack and, jumping Johnny Russet in the truck and all these people. Dan Gladman, who was an awesome producer, like he was great to me, probably one of the best producers I've ever worked for. And so all these things, I'm happy you got a ring, because that's what you do. it's not like I was hoping, man, I hope the Bucks beat the Raptors because I'm no longer, that's not the way I'm wired, you
Yeah.
know?
All right, Chuck. I'm probably gonna wrap it up here because we've
No
gone over a
worries.
half hour, and I don't want to keep you any later than I already have. And I know people have appreciated you sticking around telling the stories. The last thing I'll leave you with, as difficult as it was to ultimately make the decision to leave Toronto to join the Bulls, is it somewhat poetic, prophetic, whatever word you want to use right now, for you to almost see things come full circle for you, as much as you would have loved to have maybe stayed in Toronto, as much as you loved your time here in Canada, to go back to where it really all started for you in Chicago and to be working for the Bulls again? Do you take not just pride in that, but do you kind of look and say it's almost kind of just a cool thing to see how over the course of 30 plus years, how my career has come right back to where it started. I'm working for this organization.
Well, you know what, Eric? I'll tell you what, maybe down the road, I can look at that and maybe the circle of life. Right now, I'm living in the moment. And here's the thing. I take one day at a time. Tomorrow is promised to no one. We're going through this virus right now, Eric. I have been mentoring a lot of young people, like I did with you back in the day,
Sure.
a lot of young people. And I got a call today from a young man I've been mentoring since he was a freshman in college. And he called me today. I actually knew of this a week and a half ago. I didn't know to what degree, but his father passed away from the virus this morning. He was not there in the room because they're not allowed to come into the room.
Yeah.
And so his father passed away with a hospital worker holding his hand, not his mother, not him, not his sister. And so I look at this and I'm thinking, like, you got to appreciate life every day. I never got a chance to say goodbye to my father. My mom died in my arms. And so I take life in the moment, in this moment. So right now, I love what I'm doing. I hope I can do this for the next 10, 15 years. I'm 66, but I'm a young 66. I want to broadcast actually like Al McCoy until I'm mid 80s. I may not be given that chance. We have no idea. A radio station could change, rights, like what happened with Mike Inglis,
Yep.
with the fan acquiring rights. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe the Bulls will say one day, hey, we want to bring in somebody, and that's it. I hope that's not the case. The only thing I can control, Eric, is I can control my attitude, my skill set, the way I treat people, and more importantly, never ever become satisfied. The day you become satisfied in life is the day you might as well take your tent and go home. Because once you start mailing it in, and there are a lot of guys in this league who mail it in, but once you mail it in, then let me tell you what, that's the first sign that you might as well say, you know what, it's been a pleasure, I'm out of here. That's not the way I'm wired. I prepare just as much. I'll show you this. I prepare just as much as anyone, and I continue to. This is everything right now on the 2020 draft. Okay,
Well,
and so this 50 days. I'm looking at tape. I'm reading stuff, and it is what it is. So I'm not going to just go through the motions. And so hopefully I'll be in this chair. But Dick Enberg was a friend of mine, the legendary broadcaster. And one day we're at lunch, and he says, Chuck, let me tell you what. He says, we sit in the chair, but we don't own the chair. And, like there was this, all of a sudden there's this stillness of about 10 seconds. And it really it was like facing Nolan Ryan with a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. And I'm thinking, okay, like we sit in the chair, but we don't own the chair. And that's why as long as I'm sitting in this chair, I'm going to bust it. But that doesn't mean that if I start making mistakes, I'm going to try and no. Once I start losing it, I don't want to go out where people are saying, Well, he started screwing up. He's
Yeah.
making bad calls. He doesn't know who's on the floor. He's doing this. He's doing that. I don't want my family to remember me that way. I want to leave on top. I want to, when someone says, "Hey, what about Swirsky?" I want them to say, "Hey, boom, boom, boom," and that's what I mean. And so, you know what? I loved every second with the Raptors, and I thought I was going to be there for the rest of my life. It didn't turn out that way. I'm with the Bulls. I hope I'm here for the rest of my life. Whether it happens that way or not, I have no idea. And so I take one game at a time because there's a lot of things I can't control, Eric. Like all of us that sit in these chairs, we're very privileged. We're very fortunate. We're very blessed. And that's my mojo.
Chuck, I couldn't agree more with those sentiments and those words, and I agree with you. We can't take anything for granted, especially, I mean, all of us right now, what we're all dealing with, no matter what job we do, what the world is dealing with right now. I think that's kind of been an eye opener, hopefully, for a lot of people. But I appreciate your time over the course of 90 plus minutes now,
Hey,
Chuck.
it's been a pleasure. Eric, I love you.
Bust out the salami and cheese, Chuck. This interview is over.
Eric, I love you. Thanks. You know what?
Thanks for doing this.
You know what, Eric? You know how much I think about you, and I'm so happy for you, and I'm happy for everyone. I love Toronto, and I love the Raps, except when they play the Bulls. By the way, how many like the Raptors have won? How many straight against the Bulls? Like 11, 12, whatever. You remember when I was doing the Raptor games? Like the Bulls were losing all the time.
Yeah.
It was flipped. Or the Bulls were beating
exactly.
the Raptors. Well, now it's the other way. I'm thinking, what in the world? Maybe it's, never mind. All right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Eric, be well. Stay in touch. Good health.
I will. And all the best to your family and to everybody. Stay safe and healthy, Chuck, and we'll definitely keep in touch. And now I don't need to bug you for part 2 in a couple of weeks, but we can have you back.
And to quote Joakim Noah, hey, peace out.
See you, Chuck. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah.
See you later.